There are 8 completely different ways an island can be formed. Type 1. Continental Islands. Continental Islands used to be part of a mainland. They're not really born from the ocean at all. They're leftovers. When sea levels rise or land shifts, a piece of the mainland gets cut off and left stranded, surrounded by water. If you could drain the ocean around them, you'd see they're still sitting on the same shelf of land as the continent next door, just disconnected on the surface. Madagascar is the textbook example. It split away from mainland Africa around 150 million years ago. And once that connection was gone, the island was completely on its own. Cut off long enough, evolution takes a different path, which is exactly why Madagascar has animals found nowhere else on the planet, like lemurs. No predators ever arrived to compete with them, so they thrived in isolation. Great Britain and Greenland work the same way. Proof that not every island rises from the sea. Some are just pieces of a bigger story that got left behind. Type 2. Volcanic Oceanic Islands. Now here's the opposite. Islands that were never attached to anything. They rose straight up from the ocean floor, built entirely out of volcanic eruptions, layer after layer, until they broke the surface. Hawaii is the perfect case study. It sits above something called a hotspot, a weak point deep in the Earth's crust, where magma keeps pushing through no matter what's happening on the surface above it. The Pacific plate is constantly drifting very slowly over that fixed hotspot. As it moves, it drags the older islands away and leaves a brand new one forming behind, right on top of the hotspot. That's why Hawaii isn't a single island. It's a whole chain, each one older than the last as you move away from the hotspot. And this process hasn't stopped. Type 3. Coral Islands and atolls. Here's where it gets strange, because some islands aren't made of rock at all. They're built by living creatures, billions of them, one tiny skeleton at a time. It starts the same way as a volcanic island. A volcano rises out of the sea. But over time, coral begins growing in a ring around it, right at the surface where sunlight reaches. Slowly, the volcano itself starts sinking back down into the ocean, pulled by its own weight and the shifting crust beneath it. But the coral doesn't sink with it, keeps growing upward, always chasing the sunlight, always staying right at the surface. Eventually, the volcano disappears completely beneath the waves. All that's left is the coral ring it left behind, a shape called an atoll, with a lagoon in the middle where the mountain used to be. The Maldives is made almost entirely of these. Over 1,000 coral islands, spread across nearly 90,000 square kilometers of ocean, and yet the highest point in the entire country is less than 2.5 meters above sea level. An entire nation built by animals smaller than your fingernail. Type 4. Barrier Islands. Barrier Islands are the ocean's shock absorbers. Long, narrow ribbons of sand that run parallel to a coastline, separated from the mainland by a lagoon, bay, or sound. Unlike volcanic islands or coral atolls, these are made from nothing but loose sand and sediment, constantly reshaped by waves, currents, and storms. That means they're not permanent in the way most islands are. They genuinely move. Erosion eats away at one end, while new sand builds up on the other, and over decades, some barrier islands have been documented slowly migrating closer to the mainland behind them, like a very slow-motion wave rolling towards shore. The east coast of the United States has more of these than anywhere else on Earth. Over 2,700 barrier islands strung along the coastline from New York down to Texas. And they don't just sit there looking scenic. They take the very first hit from every hurricane that makes landfall, absorbing the brunt of the storm surge and wave energy before it ever reaches the cities and towns behind them. In a very real sense, these islands sacrifice themselves over and over to protect the mainland. Type 5. Artificial islands. Eventually, humans got impatient, waiting millions of years for nature to build islands, so we started building our own from scratch. Palm Jumeirah, off the coast of Dubai, is the most famous example. It was built using over 100 million cubic meters of sand and rock, dredged straight up from the seafloor and shaped, grain by grain, using GPS-guided machines into the outline of a giant palm tree. A shape so precise it's clearly visible from space. Type 6. Tidal Islands. A tidal island is connected to the mainland by a strip of land or a causeway, but only some of the time. At low tide, that path is completely walkable. Solid ground, dry sand, no problem at all. But when the tide comes back in, that exact same path floods completely, and the island is cut off from the mainland for hours at a time, becoming a true island again. Mont Saint-Michel in France is the most famous example on Earth. At low tide, you can walk right up to its base across open sand. A few hours later, that same stretch of ground is entirely underwater. And this isn't a gentle process. The tide around Mont Saint-Michel comes in faster than a person can run, which has genuinely caught tourists off guard, stranding some of them and putting others in real danger when they misjudge the timing. Type 7. River islands. Not every island needs an ocean. Rivers build them too, using nothing but sediment and time. It happens where a river slows down, often at a point where it splits into multiple channels. As the water loses speed, it loses the energy needed to carry sediment along with it, so that sediment starts piling up on the riverbed. Layer after layer builds up until it finally breaks the surface. Once that happens, plants take root, soil deepens, and eventually you have a permanent island sitting in the middle of a flowing river. Majuli in India is one of the largest river islands on Earth, sitting in the middle of the Brahmaputra River. It's not just a sandbar. It has its own villages, its own farms, its own distinct culture, an entire community living on land that the river itself created out of nothing. But there's a cruel irony to it. The same river that built Majuli is now slowly eroding it away, and the island loses a measurable amount of land to the water every single year. Type 8, Ice Islands, last type, and this one barely counts as land at all, even though it behaves exactly like an island in every other way. Ice islands are massive slabs of floating ice that break away from ice shelves in the Arctic or Antarctic, a process called calving. Some of these ice islands are large enough and stable enough that scientists have actually built research stations directly on top of them, living and working there for months or even years at a time, drifting wherever the ocean currents happen to carry them. But every single one of these islands is on a countdown, whether anyone living on it wants to admit it or not. Eventually, the ice melts, cracks, or breaks apart entirely. There have been real cases of research stations having to evacuate with almost no warning at all after the ice beneath their feet suddenly split in the middle of the night.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like the video, also put your opinion on comment. Make sure to turn on notification.